Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes, Episode 21. Has Hagerstown become Little Baltimore? Sexual assaults, home invasions, drive-by shootings, robberies, daylight burglaries, drugs and drug culture, weapons possessions and assaults, and even murder have become commonplace on the streets of Hagerstown. Recently, one of our Hagerstown police officers was shot in the line of duty responding to a domestic disturbance call. The citizens of Hagerstown are justifiably and understandably upset. Join Ethan and Mark as they discuss the problem with special guest Sean Flaherty.
I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And with us tonight is our special guest, Sean Flaherty. Sean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, my name is Sean Flaherty. I'm council member for the city of Hagerstown. I just got elected this past November. I'm the only Republican on the city council, but I did a big platform this past election with public safety, economic development. I moved to Hagerstown 4 years ago. I'm originally from the area. I currently work for Space Force and the Air Force, but I also was in the Army National Guard for 7 years. I worked at the Pentagon. I worked for the Secretary of Defense for Legislative Affairs. I worked for numerous Republicans in the state of South Carolina, where I'm originally from. It was good to come back to, Hagerstown and, come back to my family and my home area. So.
Well, it's good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today. You said you're working for the Space Force and the Air Force, so we have a lot in common. I'm an Air Force veteran myself. Unfortunately, Ethan was part of the Navy. So
we're more grounded.
Yeah, he's more grounded. I don't think that you're actually on the water, but that's fine. I got you, especially when you're hot bunking it on the ocean. But it's good to see you. You're also an Army veteran, you said, right?
Yes, I served in the Army National Guard, South Carolina for several years. I was a combat engineer, and then I became a chaplain. So I didn't get to go anywhere cool, but I did a lot to serve, my state and helping all the soldiers that came back with all the counseling and things like that. So,
combat engineer, that's the Army version of the Seabees, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like an 11 Bravo infantry. It's similar to that, but we would have to do the IEDs and all those things. So in the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan war, they were very much needed.
Improvised explosive devices. You wouldn't know anything about that. You were Navy. But didn't have any of those in the ocean, did they?
No, I mean, they had mines wandering around, but we avoided most of them.
Okay, good. Mines?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, underwater mines.
Yeah. All right. So, Sean, you are like 8 months ago, you got elected to the Hagerstown City Council. Tell us a little bit about that council. I know that there are 5 council people and a mayor, correct?
Yes. So last year I've never run for public office before. I moved to Hagerstown. So it was 10 people that ran. I did pretty good in the primary. I made the top 5. Because usually the top 5 make it, and then it goes on to, whoever can finish that. But I finished that pretty well. Did the top 5 in both the primary and the general. I've, like I said, never ran for office, but with Ethan and a lot of other people, we created a team. We knocked in over 10,000 houses, and it is a nonpartisan race. So I had to hit every house that I had to get. It all became down to votes. We use Numenar, and it's really back to the basics of talking to voters, understanding where they're at, where they're coming from, what's their main important thing. And the biggest thing we talked about was public safety and economic development. We have two other new members. We have Council Member Anderson and Council Member Bell. So they're both elected. Council Member Alshire and Council Member Burnett, they got reelected, and they were the current incumbents from the last administration.
So you ran on economic development as well as public safety.
Yeah, I witnessed in 2021. If everybody knows the Stube downtown in Hagerstown, it's a beautiful, great German restaurant. I had some friends from out of town come by, and we went there and we watched a couple get jumped in broad daylight right where the library and the Stube was at. And it was a horrific experience that kind of left me very shattered and shaken. And I just moved to Hagerstown, and I was not aware of how bad the drugs and crime were where I was at. And that got me wanting to run for office. And it's crazy I say that, because the officer that responded during that incident was Officer Langley, and he was recently shot this past week responding to a domestic call that was here in Hagerstown, and there was a standoff and everything like that. He was barricaded in his home for several hours. So, I just also want to, we'll talk more about it, but I was just want to let your audience keep Officer Langley in your prayers and everything like that, because he's going to have a lot of surgeries. It's going to be a while until he makes a full recovery.
And my understanding is that with Officer Langley, he had responded to a domestic violence call, and after removing the other members of the family from the house, he was dealing with the aggressor, and the aggressor fired on him and appears to have shot a major artery in his arm, and he was in critical condition. And yes, since then he's had some surgeries, and it is going to be a long battle, but certainly he is one of the heroes of Hagerstown.
12-gauge shotgun through a door. So it's just a very dangerous profession, and it is particularly dangerous for our Hagerstown city officers. And I think, Sean, you alluded to it earlier. Drugs and violence go hand in hand.
Well, and that's a big thing. We've been struggling in the city for many years, and that was my main campaign. My main two issues were public safety, economic development. We want to clean up the drugs and crime. We want to attract folks to come to our city that can, fill a lot of the empty storefronts we have downtown. We're trying to get some better businesses, that come downtown, and we want to attract maybe a higher caliber group of people that are higher incomes from maybe neighboring areas and things like that to look at Hagerstown, give us a second chance. But also, it's going to take a while to get there. I mean, we've got some great things. We have the stadium and we have the field house that, there's open. But again, what attracted me to move back to Hagerstown and deal with this wasn't the features and the amenities we have, but it was the lower cost of living, the lower taxes, and getting out of some of the more bigger cities. But that's really been my main thing. This past administration, they did increase the city budget to hire more police and things such as that. So, I'm glad that happened. We also really are trying to get an anti-camping ordinance passed. It's going to be before council this Tuesday. You will not be able to, you will not be able to sleep on public property. It does not criminalize homelessness. We're just telling folks, hey, if you refuse to heed the warning of leaving, there's going to be consequences. And I really feel like this last election, Americans, along with Marylanders in Hagerstown, they wanted some common sense. I don't think people want to see tent cities. They don't want to see needles on the ground everywhere. I hear that all the time in Hagerstown. People, they pay taxes. They expect the government to actually do what they said they're going to do. And they even removed some of the park benches at the square downtown because of public urination and people having sex acts on there. And the Barbara Ingram School of the Arts, the kids would come out of there and they would see a lot of that stuff too. So it's been a struggle downtown with trying to attract a different populace that wants to come there.
Yeah, having been a long time resident of Hagerstown, I kind of could see the trend over a period of years. I mean, if you go back 10 years, early 2015, I believe it was the Baltimore Sun, the newspaper, ran an article. It made national news, and they referred to Hagerstown as Little Baltimore. And I had people out of state mention that to me, and so that's kind of the first time that it was a really big issue that you could see. And then I believe it was about 2022 where someone on Facebook had issued a post saying, why are there people that are openly using drugs in this one particular stretch of road in Hagerstown that many people are pretty much everyone's familiar with for its drug activity. And one of the city council members said something to the effect of, well, the governor wants petty crimes to not be enforced so severely, and so therefore public drug use is being allowed. And then from there it blossomed until last year we hit the being in the top 5% nationally for the per capita violent crime in the country. And so it just progressed so quickly. And one of the things that I appreciate about Sean is that I would actually categorize him as the number one most anti-crime council member that we currently have.
Drugs and crime drive people away. That's just the bottom line, right? And obviously in law enforcement, when you eliminate what they call the low-level crimes, drug use, public urination, public defecation, sleeping, out in the public areas. When you eliminate those, you're eliminating a huge tool that police officers can use in order to improve the quality of life for everybody.
Yes, so the minute details of exactly how police officers had kind of lost the ability to enforce common sense, decency. I'm not sure of all those specifics. There's others who know more than I do. But about 8 months ago, there was a public forum that was held, and it was standing room only in the community room of the Hagerstown City Library, and citizens were just talking about what their experiences were with crime, and there were dozens upon dozens of really horrifying stories. But one of the ones that stuck the most out to me was this lady who was saying that just a couple doors down from her, some drug dealers had literally just taken over a house, essentially kicked out the current previous residents, and it was just openly people walking in and out all day long. And she said that she would just, almost like in defense of her children, she would just stand outside in the yard as the drug dealers and drug addicts were walking in and out, and essentially try to force them to make eye contact with her. She said because she just wanted them to know that there's someone there who stands for public decency and living a life free of drug addictions or crime. And that is where Hagerstown has gotten to, and that's where we are currently trying to dig ourselves out of.
Well, and I wrote a letter to Annapolis because the recent state legislator, they wanted to pass a homeless bill of rights for the whole state, where they could go and actually, they can set up tents on public sidewalks and public parks and even in parking lots and shopping centers. Luckily, that bill failed, but I wrote a letter in opposition to that this past session. And I, talked to Senator Quarterman and Delegate Schindler about that. But, I think folks want common sense. They pay taxes. They want a nice city. They want to have nice amenities. They don't want to come and see that. And I want to do everything in my power to not make us like a San Francisco or Portland, Oregon.
If you talk to any homeless advocates, people who actually help the homeless, they do not advocate for letting them camp out on the streets. The problem is not a homeless problem, it's a drug and alcohol and addiction problem. That's the real problem. Because they have to clean up in order to go to shelters and different places that they can spend the night, they don't want to go there. So if we give them the opportunity to sleep on the street and continue to use drugs, they will take that opportunity. That's the problem. And drugs, alcohol, addiction, and mental health issues are the real problems with the homeless. And I understand people who want to make it, they have compassion, they have empathy. I get it. But the problem is that you're killing people with your kindness, because you're leaving these people to the elements, to drugs and alcohol, and they're not going to get the help they need if we continue to make it easy for them to stay on the streets.
And you make a really important point, Mark. I mean, one of the things that over time has become obvious is that there's almost like two types of organizations that help the homeless, or even many different issues. It kind of comes down to these two different categories, where you have the individuals that you had mentioned, the ones who help the homeless, that are, hey, we need to do things that are going to force them to seek out help, and then we need to provide that help to them. And I know several of those individuals, and they're actually phenomenal people. But then there's a different set of organizations where essentially they provide services that do not solve a problem. They essentially just create a continuous process of providing those services. Now, the most obvious one in Hagerstown that I'm referring to is there's a needles exchange program. And what happens is that there have been literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of needles that just regular citizens, just primarily out of concern for the children walking around not getting pricked with the needles, have gone around and have picked up within literally just a block or two, filled up entire bags. And what it is that these needles, what everyone says, all the ones you just referred to, Mark, who actually do have a record of helping homeless not being homeless anymore, they all say the same thing, is that these needle exchange programs are a source of chaos and mayhem that make the problem worse. But what ends up happening is the organizations that are providing these needles and these services, they exist as well. And it's almost like these two sides of the coin pulling at each other. Or should I say, they appear on the surface to be the same coin. I think they're two very different coins.
And many times they're federally funded. It's to their benefit in order for the problem to continue. So some of these agencies that are helping the homeless, they're actually making a salary for their people for there to be a homeless problem.
Well, and the Washington County Health Department has the vending machines in front of the library where a lot of them congregate, and they have free Narcan and all the, all the drug paraphernalia you can think of that's been in there. So, I don't know if that's still there or not, but I know for a while the health department in Washington County put a vending machine there, and it was empty very soon as they put it out, from what I know.
Yeah, and look, I absolutely understand good-hearted people that want to help people, but these are the same people that will give a $5 bill or some change to the homeless on the side of the road, and they feel good about it for the moment. They're like, "Hey, I just helped somebody." No, you didn't. That person's going to go to the liquor store, or they're going to go to the local dealer, and they're going to buy drugs and alcohol with the money you provided. Well, it's much better. And by the way, all of the homeless advocates say the exact same thing. Do not give money to the homeless. Give them a sandwich. Give them a bag. Their bags filled with washcloths and wipes and snacks and water and hygiene items, socks and those kind of things. That's what you should give out to the homeless, not money. Money makes the problem continue, and it gives the opportunity for people who have a drug and alcohol problem to continue to use and stay on the streets.
Absolutely, and I'm very appreciative to individuals like Sean that are bring back and make life good for everybody, including these people that are trapped in addiction. But now it's also happening on a government level with individuals like Sean being elected.
And what, Sean, you introduce yourself as a Republican, but honestly, I don't see it as a Republican or Democratic issue. This is a common sense issue.
Exactly. And
It's common sense. People should not want homeless people defecating, urinating, and having sex in front of a school of children, or using needles and throwing them on the street, or people getting mugged in broad daylight trying to visit Hagerstown and go to a German restaurant, which, by the way, is a very good restaurant. They got some good spatzel, and they got some really good schnitzel. Which, obviously, look at all three of us. We know something about schnitzel.
Yeah, I know.
On the council with you are people from different backgrounds, I know. But the bottom line is, how do you feel the overall council shakes down on they're looking at crime and drug use?
Well, I mean, they have a very different opinion about that, according, compared to what I believe in. We had some issues that there was some controversy this past weekend. We had the No Kings protest everywhere, and a lot of the other members posted about it on their page, but they didn't once mention Officer Langley or what happened to him. And that got me very upset. And I've been told by a lot of the residents in Hagerstown, they were very mad that they didn't publicly talk about him or what happened. Um, and if anything, they have a different worldview and opinion on that. But it's hard because you do have to work together. You try to I make sure when I talk to the audience of our council meetings, who our audience is. And at the end of the day, I want to get back to the basics of where I work for the residents. I work for them. They get me in Cannon Coffee anywhere else in town and tell me about all the issues, and that's number one on my plate. They didn't want their taxes raised. They wanted the drugs and crime taken care of. And I think, at least, since I've been elected, I've been pretty true to that. And I think that folks throughout Hagerstown, they don't want us to become a Portland or a San Francisco. They don't want us to become Baltimore. And I hate that our nickname is Little Baltimore, because Hagerstown is a great place to live at. There's a lot to offer there, but we've got a lot of work to do to get to where we need to be at.
It actually is appropriate in some ways, because Baltimore was a great town and has great amenities, great things to offer, but they're completely overwhelmed with crime and drugs. I mean, completely. And you're right. And Hagerstown, unfortunately, is going through the same growing pains right now.
When the National Council of State Legislators back in 2022 ranked Hagerstown as the second highest homicide rate in the state of Maryland. I got that from Senator Quarterman. He shared that with me in a meeting at the State House. But that's pretty sad when we only have, a little over 40,000 folks in Hagerstown, and we have the second homicides in Maryland. So that's been a big issue. We had a lot of shootings last summer. Senator Quarterman wrote that letter about it. Ethan talked about it. We had the event at the library, and it was all about public safety and about things to do better. And that ignited off a firestorm with the other members. They were, they didn't like that they were being criticized, the last administration, about not really talking about the issues happening. And, they didn't acknowledge it. A lot of their philosophy is everything's wonderful and great here. There's nothing to see. We have the stadium, we have the field house, which is great. But folks, we still have issues downtown we have to deal with. And those amenities are great, but we need to hire more police, which we're working on. We have to have ordinances that give the police the tools they need. They have continuously told us they want this ordinance passed. The chief of police in Hagerstown have continuously brought it before council. They have continuously voted it down, but we're very hopeful that this Tuesday that it's going to pass. It's going to be the agenda on Tuesday. Because I want to give HPD all the tools they can to be successful to make our city better. And that's what the voters want. It's really what the voters and residents want. It's not about what I want or what anybody else wants. So
If you're on the Hagerstown City Council and you're not making life better, easier, and more effective for your police department, you are doing a huge disservice to the people of Hagerstown.
Oh, I would like to hire as many as we can that we can obviously afford to. I mean, there's not an exact specific number. I know there's several other positions we have that we still want to get filled. There's a few of them there in the academy. And they have to make it through the academy. And folks don't realize is that it takes a lot to train an officer. They have to go through the academy. They got to pass all the training. Mm-hmm. So it's not like when you hire a police officer, you're going to get one right away. You know,
6-month academy minimum. The background checks and all the other checks usually take between 3 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. So from start to finish, even getting them on the street is 1 year. And then after that, they're on probation for at least 6 months, sometimes up to a year. So you're not going to have a fully certified, ready to roll police officer from hiring date for at least a year to 2.
Well, and we increased the starting salaries in the 60s range because ours was very low. Ours was very low compared to other. It was, and that's a problem for recruitment because we want them to join us, but then they're seeing what they're making in Frederick and Montgomery County, and more well-to-do counties than Washington County, and they're going to flock there. So, yeah.
And another thing that makes it particularly hard to get the right number of police officers is that the calls used to be of a nature where police officers could just go one police officer to a call, but the calls have gotten increasingly more violent over the years, and so now multiple police officers are required per call, and so that simply has a magnifying effect on how many police officers you need to handle the amount of crime.
And that's a huge thing. And the truth is that Hagerstown has a reputation as being a dangerous beat for police officers, and so if you're not going to pay them an adequate wage, why wouldn't they go to another county or, another place where they're going to get paid better? They're going to get supported by their politicians better, with you accepted, Sean, and they're going to get, equipped and get the benefits that they want at another department. That's because of less calls for service.
Exactly. I mean, I wouldn't blame them. I mean, You want to go to the best where you can get it at, but you also want to be knowing you're welcome in your community and that you're needed, and but we're working on that, and I think we're going to get there with the new mayor. I know the mayor shares my vision of wanting to transform Hagerstown for the better. So
that's great. That is awesome, and and of course this will lead to the economic development that you're talking about.
Well, exactly. I mean, we would like, we have several properties downtown. People are looking at them, want to redevelop, reinvest, and we have that, those amenities, and we have a lot of things we can attract folks because we are still a lot cheaper significantly compared to Loudoun, Frederick, Montgomery counties nearby, where it's a lot more expensive to buy and do business there. I've even talked about what could we do to maybe get a few IT jobs from neighboring Loudoun to pour over the border to Washington County. I mean, Loudoun County is the wealthiest county in the United States.
Unfortunately, attracting the IT dollars is going to be harder now with Governor Moore's new budget, which is going to tax IT specialties by 3%, which is ridiculous. Officer Langley, we're going to definitely continue to pray for him. But that is the reality of Hagerstown. The police officers are getting shot. There is a lot of crime on the streets, and I'm glad, Sean, that you're there with the voice of reason, not a voice of a Republican or a voice of a Democrat, but the voice of reason and common sense, because Hagerstown really, really needs that right now.
And I had Democrats that voted for me. And today, I told everybody, I'm going to be your council member, whether Republican or Democrat. You pay taxes, you live in the city residence. I'm here to serve you. And any day, I'm going to do my best to do that every day that I know how. But I think it's all common sense. It should be Republican or Democrat. It really shouldn't be.
No, I mean, crime doesn't have a political party. It affects everybody. Drugs don't have a political party. They affect everybody, right? So it's obviously behooves all of us to do some common sense soul searching and realize that crimes and drugs are going to drive our cities into the dirt.
Yeah. And
Yes.
and I think it's very important to remember, because we can forget things fairly quickly, when as life goes on. But it wasn't all that long ago that politics was not divisive the way that it is, and nobody even knew the political leanings of any of the city council members, really, so to speak, in Hagerstown. It's only been within the last 15, maybe 20 years or so that this division has gotten the way that it is. I'm in complete agreement that when you talk about local politics, 97% of the issues are completely irrelevant to political affiliation.
These quality of life issues we're talking about, they affect everybody, and everybody should be on board with common sense stuff. Like we said it over and over again. Nobody should be making policies or procedures that increase crime, and crime is a major deal in Hagerstown. I love Hagerstown. I think it's a great city in many, many ways. But the problem is nobody really wants to go down there, especially in downtown anymore, because of the exact issues we're talking about.
Yep.
So tighten up your crime, tighten up your drug situation, and you're going to have a more livable city where people are going to want to come down and invest in businesses and infrastructure and what have you, right?
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, we appreciate you being with us. We wish you good luck in all your endeavors in trying to bring these common sense policies back to the council. Hopefully you can join us again and come on out and let us know how things are going.
Definitely. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right. This has been Mark
And Ethan.
and our special guest
Councilmember Sean Flaherty.
tonight. If you do enjoy what you've seen, share it with one of your friends or neighbors. Maybe they'll get a kick out of it too. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes.
Hey, drop us a comment. We'll answer it on the next show. Like and follow us on Facebook and on YouTube, please. If you'd like to help contribute to the medical expenses for Officer Langley Dean, please go ahead and hit this QR code. Part of the proceeds from the shirts go directly to his family and their expenses, and also prayers for his full recovery are always welcome.